everybody. Welcome to Black Americana. I'm Ashley, and in this episode, we are kicking off our Real Housewives of Potomac series. Now, RHOP was not meant to be a Real Housewives series. Instead, it was supposed to be a show that offered insight into Black American social dynamics. Now, being that this is a platform that focuses on all things Black American culture, I thought it would be fun to do a deep dive into this franchise, being that we are now celebrating 10 years. And to start, we are first going to look at who was Gizelle Bryant before RHOP. She is key to the continuity of the show, as she has had substantial interactions with every cast member that has been on this show. On a personal note, I come from a different vantage point. I remember when Gizelle was married to Jamal, when she had the kids, when the scandal broke out, and when they divorced. I do not know Gizelle, but I do feel I can offer something fresh to the conversation. So if you are ready, keep watching. In season 1 of The Real Housewives of Potomac, Gizelle made the hefty claim that she has a legacy and a pedigree. So we are going to unpack that. Her father, Curtis Graves, was born in 1938 in New Orleans, Louisiana, and on his mother's side, he is a descendant of the storied Haydel family. This side of Gizelle's family was featured when she took the cast to New Orleans and they visited the Whitney plantation, which is where the Black Haydels were enslaved. Their bloodline has produced some of the most influential Black Americans in education, politics, and medicine. For example, Curtis's mother's first cousin was prominent Dr. C.C. Haydel, whose daughter was activist Sybil Haydel Morial. Sybil married Ernest Morial, who went on to become the first Black mayor of New Orleans. Their son, Mark Morial, also went on to be mayor of New Orleans and is currently president of the National Urban League and married to journalist Michelle Miller. But alongside these accomplishments, Curtis was open about the dark side of his family history. Before his passing, he wrote a book titled From Behind the Screen: How a Brash Young Man from Jim Crow New Orleans Became a Civil Rights Leader in Texas. I haven't seen Gizelle promote this book, probably because of the dispute over her father's estate, but it is still an eye-opening read. Gizelle's paternal grandmother's family experienced a placage system during slavery. In short, a placage was a system that allowed white men to have common law marriages with women who had an admixture of Negro and European blood. According to the Louisiana Historic and Cultural Vistas, this system was in place as interracial marriage was prohibited by the Code Noir, a book of laws governing conduct for people of color and European/whites in the colony. The term placage comes from the French word placer, meaning to place with. While this was not recognized as a legal marriage, placés and their unofficial marriages were recognized. In fact, the children of these unions were allowed to be baptized in the Catholic Church. End quote. In other words, these women were legally recognized concubines. They were not the same as house slaves. These women were often provided their own housing while the white man continued to live with his legitimate white wife and came and went as he so pleased. But please don't interpret this arrangement as glamorous. The Creole/Black women had no autonomy over where they were placed, and their common law husbands dictated their lives. According to Curtis Graves, there were women in his family who hated the white men they were placed with. Even with the one exception he considered a love story ended in tragedy. For the sake of time, I won't go into the tragic love story, but it left my mouth on the floor and I had to step away from the book for a while. These institutions were often traumatic and scarred families for generations. As an example, Beyoncé's maternal side also experienced the placage system. In a 2018 profile in Vogue magazine, Beyoncé spoke on how she felt these common law unions still influence how women in her family navigate relationships. Reading this added perspective for me as to why Gizelle might interact with her RHOP cast members in interracial relationships the way she does. I definitely felt I had more context about her dynamic with Candace Dillard Bassett and Chris Bassett after reading Curtis's book. Gizelle's paternal grandfather was from South Mississippi, and that side of her family left quite the mark too. Her great-grandfather, Joseph Graves, was one of the first black men appointed to a federal position when he was selected to serve as a harbor master and postmaster during Reconstruction. Joseph Graves' father was a prominent white judge in South Mississippi who is thought to have brokered the agreement for his son to be appointed. The Mississippi Gulf Coast has a Creole culture as well, but it was not legally recognized in the way Louisiana Creole culture was. When studying Mississippi racial identity, please do not use the movie Sinners as an example. For the record, Joseph Graves was black. I know some people don't want to hear this or accept this, but this was the reality of Mississippi. If you want more insight about Mississippi's history on that end, be sure to check out our historical breakdown of Sinners. Now back to Curtis Graves. He grew up in the uptown section of New Orleans and was raised and immersed in Louisiana Creole culture while navigating broader society as a black American. He said his parents tried to create an idyllic childhood for him during Jim Crow. His parents had one of the larger homes owned by a black family in New Orleans. Being that black people were still restricted from lodging at certain hotels, the Graves family was often assigned to host luminaries who were visiting from out of town. One guest they hosted was Thurgood Marshall, the civil rights attorney who went on to serve as the first black United States Supreme Court justice. Despite how much Curtis's parents tried to shield him from racism, the reality was unavoidable. His father, Buddy, led fishing expeditions for wealthy white men and built a rapport with a federal judge. When Buddy decided to pursue opening a gas station in the 1940s, he sought a letter from the judge and took Curtis with him to the historic St. Charles Avenue to visit the judge. Curtis wrote in his book, "My dad took the letter, shook his hand, and thanked him for his help. I shook his hand too. He turned to leave, and the judge stood in his door and waited until we had closed the gate of the fence, waving as he went back inside. After we got in the car, my dad turned to me. 'Did you see anything about that visit that was strange?' he asked, looking at me. 'No,' I replied. You could see that we were good friends, but he never asked us in. He never said that we could sit down on one of the many chairs on the front porch,' he said. I could see that this took something out of him to have to explain this to me. In his mind, we're not his equal, and he would never ask us to sit or come in his house," he continued. "It doesn't matter how good our friendship was. He is white and we are not. Therefore, we are not his equal. But I needed him, son. That's why I went to get his letter of recommendation." He was quiet for a moment. I could see that he was hurt about what had just happened. After what seemed like a minute or so, he felt like he could talk again. As he started the car, he said, "But I know that he doesn't think of me as his friend. If he did, he would have asked us in. This is a lesson. You get what you can out of some white people, but don't think for 1 minute that they think you're their friend." This exchange reminded me of the proximity to whiteness debate that comes up around Gizelle. I think something that is missing from the discourse is having proximity to whiteness is not the same as having access to whiteness. This distinction matters. Racism often impeded black progress, even for people of a lighter hue. And when black people did make progress, there were pervasive signs that they would never know the full benefits of whiteness. Curtis's father and uncle went on to open one of the first black-owned gas stations in Louisiana in the 1940s, which they successfully operated for 40 years. As Curtis entered his teen years, he realized how much his parents tried to distract him from the realities of Jim Crow. Curtis admitted he wanted to get away from his parents, so he decided to attend Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. He found Houston to be more progressive in civil rights than what he had seen in Louisiana, and he thrived as a young adult. He majored in mathematics, pledged Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and built a reputation on campus for his leadership. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches, he was a commanding presence. He participated in sit-ins to desegregate lunch counters in Houston, the first such protest west of the Mississippi River. As he and his comrades tried to expand their efforts, he connected with Andrew Young to secure the support of Martin Luther King Jr. Andrew Young was Dr. King's aide, who went on to serve in Congress, as mayor of Atlanta, and the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. But before then, he was Curtis's youth counselor when they attended the same YMCA in Mississippi. Curtis and Dr. King went on to work alongside each other in Texas. Desegregation in Houston was difficult, but it wasn't as brutal as the efforts seen in other states. Curtis's sharp skill as a negotiator put him on the radar of other prominent figures. While working in the finance industry after college graduation, he was invited to attend a party at the ranch of then-President Lyndon B. Johnson. From that connection, he entered politics as a campaign manager. He was also tapped as a political consultant by George H.W. Bush, the heir apparent of a political dynasty. He went on to serve as vice president under Ronald Reagan and later as the 41st president of the United States. His son Jeb Bush would become the governor of Florida, and his son George W. Bush, oftentimes simply called Debia, would serve as governor of Texas and the 43rd president of the United States. But before these feats, the Bush family was banished from their stomping ground in the Northeast and came to Texas to reinvent themselves. Curtis Graves was chosen to help them ingratiate George H.W. Bush across the color lines in a changing America. This didn't come without hiccups. One time, they attended an event where Curtis was the only black person present. A couple from their entourage brought their baby, and Curtis held the infant to give the mother a break. The audience suspected Curtis was married to the white woman and that the baby was his. Tensions rose until the elder Bush's wife, Barbara, stepped in and diffused the situation. Once people realized Curtis was not married to the woman, the crowd calmed down. Despite the close call, Curtis and the rest of the Bush political team helped George H.W. Bush secure a seat in Congress in 1966. He and the elder Bush remained in contact throughout Bush's political career, including his time as president. Young, fiery, and increasingly popular in Houston, Curtis ran and won as representative for the Texas legislature. When he took office in 1967, he, Joe Lockridge, and Barbara Jordan were the first black members elected since the late 1800s. Curtis was a theatrical politician. In fact, some of his antics remind me of Gizelle on RHOP. One time while he was speaking on the legislative floor, he took out a firearm and let off a blank shot to bring attention to his speech. He was known for being boisterous and relentless in whatever his mission was. Yet, he brought many positives to the Texas legislature. He was the first to select black pages, the youth who run tasks for congressional members. He also spotlighted discrepancies in the health insurance industry and warned that the United States would become the land of the haves and have-nots if health care coverage was not addressed. After years as a bachelor, he married Joanne Gordon in 1968. Their wedding was featured in the society section of Jet magazine. During this time, a wedding, birth announcement, or debutante being featured in Jet was the utmost status symbol in Black America. Curtis and Joanne celebrated their marriage in front of more than 500 guests at the upscale Sheraton Lincoln Hotel in Houston. When they married, Curtis was 29 going on 30, and Joanne was 19 going on 20. Not much is out there about Joanne Graves, but in case anyone is wondering, she is black. Like Curtis Graves, she is a Louisiana Creole. Stay tuned for our RHOP Season 1 breakdown where we discuss more about Black American ethnic identity and why someone like Gizelle is not considered biracial in our culture. Joanne is from Opelousas, Louisiana, near Lafayette, which is the heart of Louisiana Creole country, and it could be through her Gizelle is cousins with journalist Suzanne Malveaux. It might be through her father, but either way, they are kin. The couple had a daughter, Gretchen, followed by a son, Christopher. And on September 9th, 1970, Gizelle Annette Graves was born. Jet magazine ran her birth announcement saying, "Be it known that Curtis M. Graves has been appointed to the Population Explosion Committee of the State of Texas. On the 9th day of September at 6:15 p.m., he ran a house investigation and found that his wife, Joanne, had given birth to an 8-pound girl at Lockwood Hospital. Be it therein announced that the population of Houston, Texas, has been increased by the birth of Gizelle Annette to said member of the Texas House and his spouse." The Graves family also had a vibrant social life. Curtis became friends with the legendary Muhammad Ali, and he would stay at their home in Houston for a getaway, playing with the children during his visit. But as time went on, Curtis began to suspect he was being watched by the government. In fact, a postal worker later admitted that he had been contacted by a federal agency to spy on Curtis. Curtis was invited to testify before the United States Congress about being surveilled, where he expressed how stressful the situation had been for him and his family. Despite that, Curtis was eager to move to the next phase of his political career. The passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965 called for new congressional lines to be drawn, which were supposed to be friendlier to black voters. According to Curtis, the plan was as follows. Barbara Jordan, who was a Texas state senator, would run for a U.S. congressional House seat. Curtis would then run for her previous seat of state senator. But members of the Texas Senate didn't want Curtis in their chamber. He was perceived as combative and a contrarian. Barbara Jordan, on the other hand, was viewed as the ultimate networker. The situation came to a head when Curtis was informed Barbara had other plans. He wrote, "Word on the street was that Barbara Jordan was going to draw herself a congressional district where she could easily win a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. I really had no problem with that. Because she was the chair of the redistricting committee in the Senate, I was sure she would leave her district lines in place, and I had a great chance to win that seat." Curtis then wrote, "Lauro Cruz, my sweet mate and campaign buddy, was one of the House conferees. One day, the committee was meeting near the end of the session when Lauro rushed into our office. He was quite angry. 'You will not believe what just happened.' 'What just happened?' I asked. 'The bitch just fixed it so you can't run for the Senate.' 'What?' 'We had these maps on the table that show all of Harris County,' he began to explain. I sat there, a little numb, wondering what he was going to say next. She asked me, and I quote, 'Where is Curtis's house located?' 'I thought she was trying to protect you.' His brown face was turning red. 'I showed her your house location,' Lauro continued, 'and she had a big magic marker in her hand, and she drew the line down from River Oaks to pick up your house.' Now with his hopes of the state Senate seat dashed, Curtis decided to oppose Barbara Jordan for the U.S. congressional seat in a fit of spite. It would result in one of the nastiest political battles in Black Texas history. Curtis had been having tensions with Barbara for a while. When they ran on the same ballot, the two butted heads when he alleged she instructed their campaign workers to tell voters to only vote for her rather than every Democratic candidate. Curtis claimed Barbara was the type of person to believe only one black person could be let in at a time. She was once given a standing ovation by the Texas Senate, which Curtis said made him question her loyalty to the black cause. How could men who less than a decade ago wanted segregation be so enthralled by her unless she was their lackey, he wondered. Their relationship was further damaged over a young woman named Sandra Smith. To make a long story short, Sandra got caught up in street life and was convicted of a non-capital crime. While she was awaiting sentencing, she was shot and left paralyzed from the neck down. Despite her condition, the Texas Department of Corrections retrieved Sandra from her parents' home in 1971 and took her to prison, leaving all her necessary medical supplies behind. Sandra's mother called Barbara Jordan and pleaded with her. Sandra's sister, Deborah Conrad, detailed the conversation in her biography of Sandra titled The Blessing of Movement. She wrote, "Barbara Jordan was well known and well connected. Mama was sure she could and would do something. After all, she was a Texan, African American, and a woman. She would certainly intercede on the behalf of logic and mercy." Mama obtained the number of Miss Jordan's office and, surprisingly, spoke directly to her. She explained that Sandra had gotten into some trouble, but since her trouble, she had become paralyzed from the neck down. There was no reason for her to be in prison, and her life was at stake. She pleaded with Miss Jordan to intercede to get her child home. She had already been punished for her actions. At this point, her health was the issue. She should be cared for by her family at home. Miss Jordan, in her perfect diction in a deep barreling voice, said, "If she did it, then she should serve her time. There is nothing I can do." Sandra's mother then contacted Curtis Graves. Curtis was friendly with the lead doctor for the Texas Department of Corrections, and within days, they were able to get Sandra Smith back home to her family. He said the incident led him to question who exactly was the real Barbara Jordan. As the congressional race heated up, Barbara had a major head start. She out-fundraised Curtis several times over and secured an endorsement from his mentor, Reverend William Lawson of the landmark Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church in Houston. Lawson felt it was time for Black folks to ingratiate ourselves into the institutions we fought to be a part of, and Curtis's militancy had no place moving forward. Lyndon B. Johnson, now out of the Oval Office, had been a mentor to Curtis and Barbara, but he endorsed Barbara over Curtis. Short on cash and political cachet, Curtis used the resource he had left. He attacked Barbara's reputation. He openly discussed her sexuality, as it was heavily speculated Barbara was a lesbian, but the accusation made people uneasy with Curtis. His attacks were so persistent that Barbara's family became distressed. It is important to note that the congressional district was not majority Black. In fact, it was 50% white. When asked why Barbara was performing so much better than him, Curtis responded, "She's an Aunt Jemima." Now, we are really going to take some time and break down the Aunt Jemima piece because so many people bring this incident up when assessing Gizelle's character and the idea of inherited colorism. So, to start, what does it mean to call someone an Aunt Jemima? Aunt Jemima falls under the mammy trope. A mammy, in short, is a Black woman who takes on the physical and emotional labor of a white cause. A mammy is not necessarily a dark-skinned Black woman, although in media, dark-skinned women have historically been selected to play the role. But for the record, a mammy can be a Black woman of any complexion. The name Aunt Jemima became a part of the American vernacular after images of a giddy Black woman dressed as a maid were used in advertisements for breakfast foods. Curtis argued Barbara was being elevated because she was not a true champion of Black causes, and her disinterest in having her own family made white people more comfortable with her. Now, this is complicated, so let me give you some historical context by providing a Hollywood example. Hattie McDaniel became the first Black actor to win an Academy Award in 1940 for Gone with the Wind. In the film, Hattie portrays a woman who is enslaved by the wealthy white O'Hara family. After the Civil War, she decides to continue to work for the O'Haras and comforts her former enslavers as they adjust to the loss of antebellum life. While Hattie was thrilled about her win, many Black Americans felt her role was regressive for the 20th century. Walter White, leader of the NAACP, led a charge to stop these images in Hollywood. And in case anyone is wondering, yes, Walter White was a black man. He argued the movie industry was elevating Hattie to condition black folks to not to want to aspire for more. He chastised the industry for resisting a talent like Lena Horne because she could aesthetically compete with white women and came from an upwardly mobile family. When Hattie was asked to respond to the negativity, she quipped, "I'd rather play a maid than be one." Hattie McDaniel and Walter White locked into a years-long feud, while Lena slowly began to appear in more movies as a glitzy singer. Ironically, when Lena's scenes would appear, movie theaters in the South would demand Lena's scenes be cut because they claimed it was unrealistic to see a glamorous black woman. Now, did that make Hattie privileged over Lena? No, but it does go to show colorism within the United States is more complicated than what current Real Housewives of Potomac discourse would have you believe. Now, Barbara Jordan was never a maid. In fact, she was an accomplished attorney. But as the conditions of black lives improved, the mammy trope evolved. The idea that a black woman would strictly focus on career and forgo family and femininity sometimes falls under the mammy trope because many black Americans argue the talents of these women help white society more than they strengthen the black community. It is another reason why, and please have some patience with what I'm about to say, that some black Americans have never liked Oprah. Yes, she has done charitable works for all, but some Oprah detractors feel her social clout has been more beneficial to white talent. To be clear, Curtis Graves was wrong to refer to Barbara Jordan as Aunt Jemima, but it is important to remember the phrase has a politic behind it beyond colorism. This moment is often flattened today, so it deserves context. Despite Curtis fighting to the bitter end, he badly lost in the congressional race. He managed to perform well amongst black voters, but Barbara received over 80% of the white vote. Her win made her the first ethnically black American woman to be elected to Congress, and she, and ironically, Andrew Young, marked the first time the South had black representation in Congress since Reconstruction. Barbara Jordan was solidified as a political superstar, becoming known as one of the greatest female orators in American history. She led the impeachment process against President Richard Nixon, with her strategy playing a key role in Nixon's decision to resign. She was the first black person selected to give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention in 1976. She received a resounding applause as she stepped to the podium, with the audience having to be called to order. She later received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor, in 1994 by President Bill Clinton. She was also his first choice as an appointee to the United States Supreme Court, but she declined due to her health. So you might wonder, how did Gizelle's father manage to rehabilitate his legacy after such a catastrophic loss? I think three factors came into play. For one, Barbara Jordan passed away at 59 in 1996, which is a relatively young age. Curtis Graves lived nearly 3 decades longer, and that allowed him to be the one with the final word, as harsh as that might sound. Barbara rarely spoke of Curtis in interviews or referred to him in her writings. While that is understandable, sometimes your silence allows people blank space to write the narrative. Another factor was Barbara Jordan espoused conservative views in her last days. She proposed immigration restriction, arguing employers should be penalized for hiring undocumented workers, U.S. citizens shouldn't be allowed to sponsor their siblings or adult children for visas, and that immigrants must learn American English. As she approached the end of her life, she asked that those closest to her not confirm she was a lesbian, including her longtime partner who nursed her through sickness. Certainly, Barbara was entitled to her own politic and to identify as she so pleased, but her pivot took her from a universally loved icon to a more complicated figure for Democrats. But perhaps the most important decision Curtis Graves made to rehabilitate his legacy was to move his family out of Texas. Many felt Curtis still had a political future, but he was ready for his next act. Although Gizelle was a toddler when these events unfolded, her father's political career set the stage for her knowing when to perform and knowing when to pivot. Curtis secured a job at NASA, our space administration, in the Washington, D.C. office and quickly became a beloved leader in the agency. If you visit Getty Images, there are quite a few pictures of him and Gizelle's brother hosting events in support of the space program. The family first moved to Bethesda, Maryland, the affluent community adjacent to Potomac where Gizelle lives today, in 1973. While the children adjusted well, Curtis wanted them to have a closer connection to the Black experience, so the family moved to Washington, D.C. To this day, Gizelle considers herself a D.C. girl. Curtis also made money in other fields. He, alongside fellow NASA educator Jane A. Hodges, wrote Famous Black Americans. The book and games associated with it were the best-selling Black History Month literature in public schools for nearly 20 years. He also invested in restaurants and became a sought-after nature photographer and historian on Louisiana Creole and civil rights histories. On Gizelle's podcast, Reasonably Shady, and in various interviews, Gizelle has said she was very much treated like the baby of the family. She described Curtis as the best father a little girl could ask for. Her siblings prefer to remain private, but she has a great relationship with them and talks about them on her podcast. They attended Catholic school and had an active social life. She and her sister Gretchen seem to have a playful relationship where they roast each other. On her Instagram, she said of her brother Christopher, "He is the big brother who has been protecting me, loving me, giving me advice when I don't want it, since the day I was born." Gizelle strikes a different tone when speaking on her mother. In the after show for season 10, episode 12 of RHOP, she said, "My mother is a perfectionist. If I wasn't perfect in her eyes, whatever that means, right? Then it was a problem. That caused problems because that took away from who I am. It was more be who I want you to be as opposed to who you are." In the book, She Changed the Nation, Barbara Jordan's Life and Legacy in Black Politics, Gizelle's mother was described as being young, attractive, fashionable, and absolutely supportive of her husband. Having a mother known for her beauty can take a toll on a young girl. There was an article published in Vogue years ago I wish I could find, but it explored how the daughters of beautiful women spend their developmental years struggling with being compared to their mother. The daughters often feel they have disappointed people when they are not a carbon copy of their mother and either rebel or constantly strive to measure up to how their mother is perceived. Based on what Gizelle has said, it appears her mother was a full-time housewife. Joanne was also a member of Jack and Jill of America, an invitation-only social and civic organization for Black mothers and children. A 1978 Washington Post article stated, "There are certain distinctions that often come with having made it in Washington's Black society. It may be a big house on the prestigious gold or platinum coast of Upper 16th Street, a home in affluent Potomac or McLean, driving a shiny Cadillac Seville, or if one has really made it, being chosen for membership in Jack and Jill." For all of her mother's pageantry, Gizelle says she was more of a tomboy and played varsity basketball. Gizelle has also revealed several times on Real Housewives of Potomac that she has struggled with low self-esteem most of her life. In season 1, episode 8, Gizelle revealed she did not start to feel good about herself until she was in her 40s. In season 7, episode 10, she told her twins they exhibited so many of the qualities she wished she could have as a teenager, but she couldn't because she didn't have the confidence. Giselle holds information about herself close to the chest, so when she volunteers something, you almost wonder if it is a cry for help. You can't help but wonder why her self-esteem was so damaged at a young age. I wish her castmates had taken this opening Giselle gave them and pried her open. But growing up, Giselle still had her fun. She said her parents spoiled her and she didn't have to want for anything, but her father did teach her the value of work. While working in high school, Curtis would prank call her to be certain she was really doing her job. She dated Dennis Scott, who went on to play 11 seasons in the NBA when she was in high school, and he took her to her prom. Her mother adored him, and while the two didn't work out, Giselle says they are still good friends to this day. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the historically black Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and majored in marketing. During her studies, she was initiated into the Gamma Theta chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in the spring of 1990. Her first job out of college was as the event planner of the National Office of the NAACP in Baltimore. Giselle recalled that people questioned why she wanted to work for the organization because so much had changed by the 1990s, but she valued the legacy. She stated on Reasonably Shady she absolutely loved the job, to the point it didn't even feel like work. According to her, it was during this time she learned a lot about production and made connections that would serve her throughout life. One of her tasks was to help produce the NAACP Image Awards. The NAACP also tapped her to interface when important guests visited, so she hosted the likes of Hillary Clinton on behalf of the organization. Afterwards, she worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep, another job she says she loved and allowed her to be footloose and fancy-free. But for all her fun, Giselle admitted she had a temper in her 20s, and the woman we see today has mellowed out.
Yeah, my sister has stormed out a couple times. But anyway, or normally it's sometimes back when I was younger and I had a very hot temper, it was me.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I would eat first, of course.
You had a hot temper?
I used to, yes. Anyway, we're moving on. Listen.
No. Anyway. What?
I did. I used to have a very hot, I would get angry very quickly and then just like say what I had to say. And then I didn't have a filter.
Yeah.
Now I have a filter. I don't get that angry. And I'm a much better person.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, at what age did this
These
evolve?
were my 20s. Oh, the 20s was like rip roaring.
Yeah.
I was on fire.
Yeah.
One person she met at the NAACP was Jamal Bryant, a Baltimore native. They were the youngest two people on the job, so they naturally gravitated towards each other, but they also shared a deep love for civil rights history. Jamal came from a background similar to Giselle's, but he had a more unconventional journey. Born on May 21st, 1971, he is the son of John Richard Bryant and grandson of Harrison James Bryant, who both at one point served as the head bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the oldest Protestant denomination founded by black people. Jamal traveled with his family all over the world spreading the gospel, but he failed the 11th grade and was expelled from school. He found a mentor in Bishop Eddie Long, who paid his tuition to attend Morehouse College in Atlanta. The NAACP initially hired Jamal on a per-job basis, where he was assigned to educate voters in post-apartheid South Africa in 1994 and run voter registration drives at HBCUs. His father also assigned him the role of assistant pastor at his church, Bethel AME, which has 11,000 members. He was hired full-time as the NAACP's National Youth Director in 1996, but his profile raised the following year when he hosted peace summits in the wake of the Tupac Shakur and Notorious B.I.G. tragedies. Jamal wanted to find a way to maintain his momentum, so Giselle suggested he start a church. The thing is, Jamal didn't want to be a pastor. Jamal's father was also against the idea of him leading a church. Still, Giselle continued to encourage the idea because it was the fastest way for him to grow a base of supporters. To help you understand this time in Jamal's life, I am going to try to reverse engineer Jamal's reputation. Before he was known as Pastor Holy Whore, he had a respectable future with people believing he could be a young Jesse Jackson or pick up where Martin Luther King Jr. left off and possibly enter politics. When people downplay that Gizelle married a pastor or feel she couldn't do any better than a pastor, I think that stems from people not understanding the magnitude of the black church and why someone like Gizelle would gravitate towards Jamal. And when I say the black church in this video, I mean in the black American tradition within the United States. Let's go over these 3 facts about the black church. There is no other institution that holds more black wealth than the black church. Yes, we have people in our community who have become millionaires, and in a handful of cases, billionaires in the sports and entertainment industries. We spend billions a year in the beauty industry. But the fact remains, we do not have significant ownership in any of these sectors. The black church is the quickest way for a black person to access black dollars. Even with a drop in attendance, the black church still generates about $19 billion a year in the United States. When you add in the property assets churches hold, that number expands. Second, pastors tend to hold social capital longer than an athlete or entertainer. Athletes often peak in their 20s, sometimes 30s, and only a rare few still draw eyes once they retire. The entertainment industry is even more fickle. While being a pastor might not be as glitzy in your youth, you become a desirable ally in time. When a candidate is running for president or whatever office, one of their first priorities is to contact the church. When a developer wants to build a new project in town, they usually connect with the pastor on that side of town. Pastors can keep this prestige well into their 80s, 90s, or even as a centenarian if they get there. The third factor, and this is where Gizelle comes in, is that pastors are expected to have a wife. So first ladies are treated with a certain deference that the wives of athletes and entertainers might not be. Of course, you have exceptions like Denzel Washington with Pauletta and LeBron James with Savannah, but in many cases, the wives of athletes and entertainers are seen as interchangeable, as unfair as that might be. Pastors are measured by their wives and how long they can maintain their marriage. Often when politicians or developers are seeking an endorsement, their wives meet the first lady first, and from there they share with their husbands if a deal seems possible. So being a first lady was right up Gizelle's alley. But Gizelle and Jamal's courtship had some rough patches. She shared that she and Jamal had been off and on for years before they married. In 1998, he became the father of a daughter named Topaz with a woman from a previous relationship. Nevertheless, Jamal was granted his own AME church, and he and Gizelle established Empowerment Temple African Methodist Episcopal Church on Easter Sunday, 2000. One of the guests in attendance that day was legendary activist and comedian Dick Gregory, who had also encouraged Jamal to start his own church. Gizelle was instrumental in marketing the church. They would pass out flyers, almost like promoting a club party, and appealed to college students. But Empowerment Temple quickly became a lightning rod for controversy because Gizelle and Jamal were not married. Now, if it sounds crazy to you to start a church with your boyfriend, I agree. I have never heard of such either. Now, allegedly, Gizelle and Jamal were supposed to marry in 2000, but the wedding was canceled weeks before the ceremony. We'll get more into that soon. And around this time, Gizelle's parents' marriage collapsed. Based on a conversation Gizelle had with her girls on RHOP, her father is who decided to end the marriage, and her mother was left to figure out how she was going to survive as he was the breadwinner. By the time her parents divorced, Curtis and Joanne Graves had been together about 35 years. With Gizelle and Jamal preparing to marry in 2002, Gizelle gave her mother her old home. I can only imagine how stressful stressful this was for Gizelle as someone who loved being the baby of the family, now having to support the matriarch, especially since they didn't always see eye to eye. Not long after her parents' divorce was finalized, her father married a woman named Kay. Because we have had people of every hue discussed in this video, yes, Kay is Caucasian. I am not sure if she played a part in breaking up Curtis and Joanne's union, but surely the optics got tongues wagging in their social circle. Curtis and his new wife established a new life in Georgia, and Joanne returned to Houston, while Gizelle and her siblings remained in the DMV. Although both parents visited her frequently, Gizelle said it took them over 20 years to be willing to be in the same room together again. While I was working on this video, it was confirmed that Gizelle lost her challenge to her father's will. I think one of Gizelle's biggest challenges has been accepting that her hero was human. To make my point, I'll use another celebrity example. The actress Lisa Ray appeared on an episode of Iyanla Fix My Life with her mother and daughter. Anyone familiar with Lisa Ray knows she was an absolute daddy's girl whose father was well-to-do and catered to her every whim. Lisa Ray's mother, on the other hand, said he was a horrible husband and she remained in the marriage for the lifestyle. While Lisa Ray's parents never divorced, her father did leave the home to live his life with other women. Lisa Ray and her mother had a contentious relationship, with Lisa Ray even going as far as saying her mother drove her father away. Iyanla explained to both women that the father's love was conditional. He allowed the mother to be the strict one so he could always be the hero to Lisa Ray, and created competition between mother and daughter so ultimately he could maintain control, using money as his bait. The realization nearly sent Lisa Ray over the edge. A key difference between Lisa Ray and Gizelle is Lisa Ray's father brutally had his life taken when Lisa Ray was in her early 20s, so she nearly placed her father in sainthood. Gizelle had no escape from the reality of her father, and, in my unprofessional and unlicensed opinion, I believe she has hyper-compartmentalized to cope. Now let me apply that same lens to Curtis and Joanne's dynamic. There is an old saying in the legal profession that you never really know who you are married to until you get a divorce. Let's really break down the dynamics of Curtis and Joanne Graves' relationship. A teenage girl fresh out of high school married an almost 30-year-old man. I understand age gaps were viewed differently in the past, but even by 1968 standards, based on what people have told me, this dynamic was quite off. He was college educated, had traveled internationally, and was a respected politician while she retreated to the home and bore children close together. Let's consider how life was when they divorced in the early 2000s. By this time, Joanne is in her 50s, has little to no contribution to Social Security, has little to no retirement, and according to Gizelle, she had no idea what she was going to do. I don't know what went down in the marriage, and Joanne might have played her part in its demise, because as the old saying goes, it is never all one person. And I understand people fall out of love and divorce happens. However, the way Curtis handled this was harsh towards a woman who gave him her youth, 3 children, and her labor so he could continue to pursue his dreams. I think it is very telling he left the task of Joanne transitioning to single life on his children. We know at the very least Gizelle had to support her mother when she should have been able to focus on establishing herself, but Curtis seemed not to care. The way this divorce went down reflects what their marriage was and wasn't. As far as the will, it would not surprise me if Curtis changed it to where Gizelle received nothing. I know some people want to call this her karma or recompense, but I disagree. I think it was the final act of who her father had always been, and Gizelle has tried to compartmentalize it away. Think about how he handled the Barbara Jordan situation. Even if she did sabotage his state Senate campaign, he could have still had a great political career and run for another position in due time. But because he did not get his way when he wanted it, he went to war, even when he knew it would cause him to self destruct. He showed a pattern throughout his life that when he wanted his way, he would destroy everything in his path, even when it made no sense. I think he took decisions his children made personally. Curtis Graves is an example that you have to be careful what you say in life. Remember when he put Barbara Jordan on blast for her lifestyle and disregarded how that affected her family? He had to eat that later in life. If you read Gizelle's book, My Word, you'll know what I'm referring to. And as complicated as Gizelle's relationship might be with her mother, the fact she would never embrace Curtis's new wife shows her loyalty to her mother, and I doubt Curtis appreciated that. People love to say Jamal is to blame for why Gizelle is the way she is, but I think her decision to marry Jamal was the result of who she already was. Gizelle and Jamal married in the summer of 2002 against her parents' wishes, with her father refusing to attend the ceremony. But Jamal's side had some pushback too. Gizelle was raised Catholic, and by her own admission, she knew nothing about what she had gotten herself into.
Fair. And just looking back, could you have ever predicted that you would even be a preacher's wife?
Oh, no. I was born and raised Catholic.
Oh.
So I didn't even know what a preacher was, let alone a first lady.
Okay.
I had no clue.
Uh-oh.
That whole experience was totally a different world for me.
Yeah.
A great experience. I think that what people do in ministry is a phenomenal thing. And it really gave me a platform to do a whole lot of things that I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to help young girls, and I wanted to build an orphanage in South Africa. Stuff that I wanted to do, it gave me the ability and the platform to do it. So I was happy.
I hear a lot of horror stories about just being a first lady. Did you ever have any crazy encounters with crazy church women?
Of course. That just comes with the territory. That just comes with it, baby. But, you know, you realize that people are wounded. People are sad. People are lonely. And they come to the church looking for relief from all of that in their special way. And sometimes the first lady is a victim of all of this specialness that they want to share with you unnecessarily.
I can only imagine.
In addition, Gizelle was unlike the women Jamal's father and grandfather married. They were not first ladies, they were theologians. Jamal's paternal grandmother pastored alongside her husband. Jamal's mother earned a doctorate in ministry and built international women's ministries. Many of you have probably heard of his sister, Tamar Bryant, who also earned a doctorate, is an elder in the AME Church, and is a professor at Pepperdine University. Some people felt Gizelle was frivolous compared to the women from Jamal's bloodline and did not have the spiritual maturity to support a man in the pulpit. Ironically, Gizelle and Jamal not having a traditional church marriage drew an untapped audience to Empowerment Temple. In fact, Jamal said he wanted to appeal to what he called the unchurched, those who either had no church home or felt unwelcome in other places of worship. Their church quickly grew to a membership of 10,000. After seeing Gizelle's behavior on Potomac, many have asked what was she like as a first lady, and for the most part, the church loved her. She didn't try to convince anyone she was Jamal's religious peer, but she was engaging and developed a lot of church outreach programs. She also started their women's conference, A Woman's Worth, which was on pace to match T.D. Jakes' Woman Thou Art Loose conference, or as his daughter Sarah Jakes Roberts calls it today, Woman Evolve. Gizelle gave birth to daughter Grace in November 2004 and twins Angel and Adore in April 2006. With small children and a growing profile, Gizelle became lost in Jamal's world.
Prior to finding out from, word on the street, were you ever suspicious that he had anything going on? Did you ever question him, or there was no type of intuition that was telling you something ain't right? So you were blindsided by the fact when it came through from word on the street.
Yeah, and it could have been, at the time I was having baby after baby after baby. Like I had a lot of kids. I was, in mommy mode. I wasn't even, how sometimes you get these spidey senses. My senses were in the trash can. Like I wasn't even in that frame of mind to even think something might be happening. So no, not at all.
Your senses was like, my kids is hungry. Let me go feed my kid. Like it wasn't about
I'm exhausted.
Yeah. So I think that's how guys get away with stuff too. It's like once you get really busy and you can't really focus on them, it's like so easy for them to like slide and do something when you're not really, looking for that or paying attention to that.
Yeah, and no excuses for the behavior, but like I wasn't even paying attention to him. Like I was overwhelmed with children. I had 3 kids under 3.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, it was babies. I mean, it was Pampers and milk.
I'm overwhelmed hearing about it, child. Like.
In later years, Gizelle would say she felt controlled during her marriage. Jamal even went about picking her clothes.
I'm just saying.
No, Robin, she's only giving you half of the story. What she misses is that I was picking her clothes out. That's what she misses. When I was picking her clothes out, Robin, she wasn't in no blogs. The only time there's somebody clothes when I don't pick it out.
Oh my God. Okay, the shade.
I'm glad that we brought this up. Robin, I need you to be a witness. Robin, you got to be a witness.
Jamal was my first stylist.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Jamal was also the introduction to her hairstylist Cal, who we often see on RHOP. According to Cal, Jamal introduced me to Gizelle and I styled her hair. She wasn't that satisfied with it, so I called her and she was like, well, I like it, but next time let's do this. So after that, we just hit it off. Gizelle had the trappings of luxury. Her family lived in a 7-figure waterfront high-rise in Baltimore's Canton neighborhood. She drove a brand new Bentley, carried Birkins, had a nanny, and stepped out in the latest designer fashion. In fact, some media outlets criticized Gizelle for outwardly living such a luxurious life while people in Empowerment Temple's neighborhood struggled. I know some folks out there think Gizelle ain't never had nothing and struggled all her life. But yes, there was a time when Gizelle Bryant was ostracized for being too lavish. Despite that, she and Jamal were the subjects of beautiful features in publications like Ebony magazine, and many were excited to see what Jamal would do next. Some predicted he would be elected as a U.S. representative to Maryland's 7th Congressional District, or he might start his own version of Dr. King's Southern Leadership Conference. He and Gizelle had found a way to get young people engaged in church, and things seemed to only be looking up. And it was around this time Jamal's behavior shifted. Rumors circulated that Jamal had impregnated several women, including a 17-year-old girl who attended his church. Jamal vehemently denied he impregnated a minor. It should be noted that the age of consent in Maryland is 16. So did he not impregnate someone underage, or is he playing semantics because of Maryland law? I don't know, but it remains a scar on his reputation. In 2007, a woman emerged stating she had given birth to Jamal's child in 1999 and demanded an increase in child support. Rumors have been flying he had another child prior to his marriage to Gizelle, and it was said to have played a role in why the alleged 2000 wedding was canceled. The church asked Jamal to step down pending a paternity test, but he refused. Jamal went about giving a series of bizarre sermons that he has had successfully scrubbed from the internet. In one message, he spoke about the anointing on R. Kelly's life, and that the singer found himself in legal trouble with underage girls because he had a calling on his life. During another service, he asked for children who had been abandoned by their fathers to come to the altar in prayer. After months of speculation, he confirmed the child born in 1999, a little girl named Naomi, was his child. As controversy grew, Gizelle reportedly took a self-imposed sabbatical from the church. She sought the counsel of church elders and those she considered friends in the church cloth, but she said she received little support. She was instead told to stay with Jamal because the church was too successful to walk away. After being absent for weeks, she returned to the church to the glee of many. The next day, reportedly, she filed for divorce. Jamal tried to beat Gizelle to the courthouse, but she made it first, edging him out by 5 minutes. She filed for a divorce while he filed for a legal separation. In case anyone might be wondering, a legal separation acknowledges that a couple is living apart, but the marriage is still legally recognized. Gizelle and Jamal locked into a legal battle, with her letting the judge know she wanted to be through with him and have the proceeding placed under seal. The judge ruled in her favor. Gizelle has expressed she regrets not having a prenup before marrying Jamal. Because so many laws are written in favor of churches, sometimes it can be difficult to define the ways an individual develops the church as an enterprise. Gizelle was the marketing and business mind behind Empowerment Temple, so perhaps a prenup spelling out her role in building Jamal's net worth could have made the difference. In many ways, it would have been more financially advantageous to stay with Jamal. She could have declared she forgave him, the two write a book, and build a conference around it. Gizelle says she decided to file when she did rather than when the girls were older because she knew in her heart things were not going to change. Although Jamal set much of his own misery in motion, he found the situation traumatic because he is the first person in his family to get a divorce. He also expressed that he never thought Gizelle would leave him.
And here you are, a young pastor,
yes,
thriving, growing church. And all of a sudden, those temptations meet you head on.
Well, I didn't have a litmus test. You have to understand, I was a national televangelist since I was 29. And the whole world had opened up for me. In every stage, I'm preaching in arenas, convention centers, mass mega churches, was quickly becoming a household name. So nothing in my mind ever said, one, I would ever get caught. Number two, that my wife would ever leave. Number three, that my church would tank out.
Walk us through. What happened?
I stepped rolling outside of my marriage and had a extramarital affair that ultimately ended in a divorce to an incredibly wonderful woman, not because anything was flawed in the marriage or in her, but in my own immaturity for the level that I was getting ready to go into. And when that happened, I think I was one of the first, if not the first, I don't want to take the honor, the first real black pastor to go through being castigated over the internet.
Let's talk about your former wife and your children.
Yes.
You still speak very highly
yes.
of your former wife.
Yes.
How did you have to help her heal, but also help your kids heal?
Yeah. One of the critical things my ex-wife said to me is, I didn't divorce you because of the infidelity. I divorced you because I no longer recognized you. That you went into a dark place, was mad with the world, and you were just worried about saving your career, not saving the marriage. And so I think I became a better person post the divorce than I was in the marriage. This journey has really been a process, and she and I are still great friends and on two different paths of life, and are still able to operate in a meaningful way for the sake of friendship and parenting.
Gizelle placed her daughters in therapy after the divorce was finalized in 2009. In fact, the girls had therapy amongst themselves. Then Gizelle and Jamal had therapy to figure out a co-parenting style. And then Gizelle, Jamal, and the girls had therapy together. Her intelligence to go through therapy with the girls shows how intentional she has been in not repeating certain family cycles when raising them. Now her own woman, Gizelle tried her hand at several ventures. One was a shapewear line called Slimanizer she co-launched in 2009. She designed the line alongside Kate Leegey, who was one of the original designers for Jessica Simpson apparel and went on to design Taylor Swift's clothing line. She also started a dessert line called Sweet Gizelle. If you watch RHOP or listen to Reasonably Shady, you know Gizelle is not much of a cook, but she is talented at making pastries. Her friend and Top Chef alum Timothy Dean asked her to contribute her talents to his menu. Her best friend Erica Jones, who many remember as Erica Lyles, who Gizelle said Ray Huger wanted a night with, included her in a revitalization project in Erica's hometown, Birmingham, Alabama, alongside the Environmental Protection Agency. What I remember of her social media pre-RHOP, she posted a lot of pictures with her girls, like taking them to Martha's Vineyard and spending time with her extended family. And while she has been on Potomac, she has not brought most of her core friend group on the show, many of whom she has known longer than her castmates, including Robin. So after such a brutal public divorce, you might wonder, why did she ever entertain Jamal again? To answer that question, I will make an exception and briefly reference season 5 of RHOP. But before we do, let's circle back to Jamal's mentor, Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long was one of the most influential pastors in the United States in the decades he led New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Metro Atlanta, at one point having over 25,000 members. In 2010, several young men came forward and alleged Long began mentoring them when they were minors, and they came to view him as a father figure. They claimed that once they reached the age of consent, Long coerced them into a sexual relationship. Long denied the allegations. His church tumbled and he passed away with his reputation in tatters in 2017. In the years since Gizelle left Jamal, his reputation took a beating in the city of Baltimore. He entered the congressional race in 2015 for the seat people once thought he was a lock for, but quickly dropped out when it was apparent he had no chance to win. Attendance at Empowerment Temple fluctuated, and it was apparent Baltimore's native son had run his course in the charmed city. As New Birth tried to regain its footing, Jamal was invited to lead the church of his former mentor. Many in the congregation were furious, feeling Jamal serving as pastor was an insult considering Bishop Long's scandal. Some people even mounted a campaign to stop him from being installed. Gizelle still had a lot of influence over Jamal's reputation. Although she expressed on social media she and Jamal were friends and had moved past their issues, many church folk were still angry with him about what he put Gizelle through. He needed aggressive image rehabilitation to secure his new role in New Birth. Having Gizelle embrace him could help him do that. So why would Gizelle help? Well, Gizelle has 3 children with him. She values family legacy and her girls having a positive image of their father. And while Jamal proclaims the church to be his calling, it is also his income. Gizelle probably wanted to help him secure his position so he could keep paying his child support and alimony. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with the Real Housewives of Potomac Season 5 reunion, Gizelle's cast member Monique Samuels had a binder that included text messages from Jamal telling a mystery woman he was not in a relationship with Gizelle as the show portrayed and was only appearing on the show to help her. Despite the information in Monique's binder, I believe Gizelle brought Jamal on RHOP so he could have a storyline to buffer his reputation, not hers. Remember, I followed them before Bravo, so I have a very different perspective than most viewers. Jamal didn't have to be dragged on reality TV. He had already been on a few failed reality shows. He appeared as the spiritual advisor to Omarosa on her dating show, The Ultimate Merger, and to singers Casey and JoJo on their show, Casey and JoJo Come Clean. And in 2016, he was on the first season of the reality series, The Preachers, a show he and others couldn't even get picked up by a network. He likely told another woman they had to keep things on the low because his ex was pressuring him to continue an image, which is a play many men run. And we know Gizelle is not the clapback queen, but I think her silence at the reunion was mostly due to her not wanting to jeopardize Jamal's check at New Birth. I don't think Gizelle would have been in trouble with Bravo for not having a boyfriend season 5. Ultimately, I believe Gizelle is the way she is for reasons beyond Jamal's infidelity. I think labeling her as the pretty girl who couldn't take she got cheated on is an oversimplification of who she is. The collapse of her parents' marriage and the pressure to live up to the promise of the black bourgeoisie impacted how she navigates the world. She was born into institutions people strive to enter, but she has experienced institutional failure firsthand. She knows that having the look, the fashion, and the status guarantee you no protections. I also feel Gizelle is a victim of spiritual malpractice. She sought out the church during a vulnerable time in her life. Her family she was born into and the new family she created were collapsing. The people who were supposed to spiritually counsel her told her to focus more on looking like she had it together than her actually having it together. I think some people underestimate how much religious trauma can change how you interact with people. By the time Gizelle Bryant appears on The Real Housewives of Potomac, she is not searching for power. She is already seeing what it costs. She is not searching for belonging. She understands how conditional it can be. So instead, she watches, she listens, and she asks questions that make rooms uncomfortable. Not to tear them down, but to see what they are actually built on. Thank you for watching. For our next video in this series, we will be doing a breakdown of season 1. Now, it won't be a recap. Instead, we will pull out key moments and we will examine them through a Black American cultural lens. So if you have not already, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Please sign up for our newsletter at blackamericana.substack.com, and you can also find us over on TikTok. See you soon. Thank you.